Hello my little horror family, I hope you're all doing really well. My name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies, old and new. Today it's time for another movie review, and in this episode we are taking a look at the newly released and highly anticipated Five Nights at Freddy's, the long-awaited film adaptation of the game series of the same name. Seriously, people have been waiting for this for years, seeing as how it was first announced all the way back in 2015. That means that anyone who was playing the game age appropriately, say 12 years old, is now an adult in their 20s. But it's here, it's been released, and we are going to talk about the film completely spoiler-free. Although I may get into some spoilers at the end, but I'm not sure about that yet. But if I do, then I will give you a clear spoiler warning beforehand. If you're new here and you found me through this episode, then why don't you click that subscribe button? Come join our little What the Horror family and enjoy this safe space to share our love of horror. The film follows a troubled security guard as he begins working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. While spending his first night on the job, he realises the night shift at Freddy's won't be so easy to make it through. Just to be clear up front, I am reviewing this film having never played the games before. I am well aware of them, however. I used to work in a school and the kids were mad about it, but my review will not be from a fan point of view. And I am aware that there will be lots of things that went over my head and Easter eggs that I just won't have picked up on. So just bear that in mind. But even as someone who hasn't played the games, I'm not blind. I've seen the hype, the excitement and the expectations for this film. When I usually book to see a film at the cinema for this channel, I tend to go early doors for the first viewing, so I can watch, come home, write a script and film. And usually there's only me or one or two other people. Not for Five Nights at Freddy's though. Even at the first viewing, there were loads of people, mostly young lads, but they were excited and there were lots of audible "huh" and laughs, so I assumed that there were plenty of nods to the game and things to enjoy if you are an established fan. I did a bit of reading, as you do after I watched the film. Did a little internet searching, looking a bit into the film's production, and apparently the game's creator, Scott Cawthon, was heavily involved in the making of the film. He's credited with story by, co-writing the screenplay and producing. This is hopefully good news for fans of the game as it's being handled by someone who knows it inside and out. But the first thing that I want to talk about is the film's age rating. So, Five Nights, or FNAF, little bit of the lingo for you there, is a 15 in the UK, which means no one under the age of 15 can go and see it, and it's a PG-13 in the US. Both of these ratings mean the film is sadly lacking in any real violence or gore, or even scares for that matter. It's basically a bloodless film, and while that is okay, you don't need violence and gore to make a good horror, but considering the type of horror film that this is, that removes a lot of the threat that is attached to Freddy and his gang. Freddy and the other animatronics were the thing I was most excited about seeing. They're a different breed of horror villain. And I think the only ones that come close to them are the Banana Splits gang from the 2019 film. Oh, and maybe Willy's Wonderland. And Benny Loves You. Okay, so there's a couple, but you get the idea. But I was looking forward to seeing how they would be used. And unfortunately, because of the bloodless aspect, we don't get anywhere near as much killer robot action as I would have liked. In fact, the animatronics are kept to the shadows for a good chunk of the movie. As far as scares go, I would say the film suffers like it does with the violence, and outside of the usual jump scares, there are no notable scary moments. For me anyway, but I've said it before, fear is subjective. I guess from the point of view of it being targeted at a young audience, there is enough to scare you without it being too much. I think Five Nights is a great entry-level horror film. That all being said though, it would be a miss for me to not mention two standout scenes. The first one is the opening of the film itself, and then there's another about a third of the way in. And while everything I just said still stands, despite the restrictions, the director, Emma Tammy, does find a way to get creative in these scenes, and there is one kill that I genuinely liked. The scene further into the film is when we probably get the best moments with Freddy and the gang. There is definitely fun to be had in this scene, but I just would have liked more moments like this, more moments with them. As for the titular Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, I loved the set. You've got this great juxtaposition of the modern day setting with the decaying pizzeria, full of manky children's play areas and grimy game prizes, grainy security cameras, and things like this old VHS tape containing instructions for the security guard. And seeing the building from the outside in the dark all lit up, there's something quite otherworldly about it, and I think it's a great visual. The animatronic animals themselves are fantastic. I will say that they do look really good. They were created by Jim Henson's Creature Shop and look like an exact replica of the game characters, from what I can see anyway. They were definitely a highlight for me, just, if like I said earlier, slightly underused. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the characters. I have to say that the characters, for me, were a mixed bag. The two leads were the strongest by far. They were also the most well acted. I genuinely liked their relationship. I found that they had real chemistry, so I bought into their story. I also appreciated how their relationship and information about their relationship and backstory wasn't spoon-fed to us. Instead, it was unfolded in a natural way over time. The cop Vanessa acts as a bit of an exposition piece for the audience, as this is a character who has more knowledge of the pizzeria than Mike the security guard, but she does evolve a bit past that role as the film progresses. There is also a cameo role for Matthew Lillard, and what film isn't improved by the inclusion of Matthew Lillard? It's perhaps the calmest role I've ever seen him in. He's not that goofy, but there are some tiny moments of humour from him still. Look, it's Stu Macker though, I'm not complaining. Aside from that, there are a handful of other characters who act as a mixture of help the story along and cannon fodder, but to be honest, they're not the best, either in the way they're written or acted. And one of them in particular seems to think that they're a Disney villain or in a pantomime. I mean, they are hamming it up. In terms of story, look, it's a hard job to translate stories from the page or from a game onto the big screen, and game adaptations don't always have the best track record. There are a few I enjoy. I didn't mind the Uncharted film last year, but that's because Uncharted is my favourite game series, and there was plenty for me to enjoy. But I've not rewatched it, and I enjoyed the Tomb Raiders because as a teen I loved Angelina Jolie, but Resident Evil failed to capture the feel of the game. Warcraft had no real substance, despite it being great to see Stormwind and Orgrimmar. And don't even get me started on Doom. Anyway, tangent aside, I understand that filmmakers have a difficult task on their hands, but what gave FNAF an upper hand is that its original creator was on board to help write the screenplay. And yet, while the story was fine, it never progressed to great. I can see what they were trying to do, and there are moments that work well. As with the relationship between the two leads, there is information relating to the story which is given to the audience over time, things that you saw earlier coming back to have more meaning. The screenplay is written in a way that you can understand how and why Mike takes the job at Freddy's and why he keeps going back. It's a believable situation, as are the events that lead other characters to the pizzeria. But Five Nights is guilty of what a lot of modern day horror is guilty of, and that is relying on the current buzzword to base its story around. Yep, that's right, Five Nights is another horror film to use trauma to add depth to the story and its characters. But while it tries to create something deeper, it ultimately just feels a bit lackluster and generic. There are a number of mysteries in Five Nights relating to certain characters and certain events, and I will say that after we get the reveal of these mysteries, things do pick up a little bit in terms of action. But the problem is, most of these reveals are predictable and I saw them coming a mile away. It doesn't detract from the fun at the end, but it doesn't exactly blow your socks off either. Okay, so I think I am going to talk a little about spoilers because there is one element that I really want to talk about which I can't in a spoiler-free way. So that's your heads up if you don't want to hear spoilers, but if you are leaving here and you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to give it a like as it helps the channel and pleases the YouTube overlords. But if you are sticking around, then let's talk about the Yellow Rabbit. The Yellow Rabbit is the villain, the big bad of the film, who is revealed at the end like the boss level of a game. I will say that I did predict who was going to be under the suit and that they had kidnapped Mike's brother, but even though I knew, I wasn't disappointed. I wanted more screen time with Matthew Lillard. The Yellow Rabbit is a character who was hinted at through the film, but then ended up being one of, if not the most interesting part of the story. Sure, the film has tried to play on trauma like lots of other horror films, but it also started to slightly delve into gaslighting, mental abuse, and even Stockholm Syndrome. And I feel like these, especially Stockholm Syndrome, aren't seen as often. The ghost children commit these acts of violence through their animatronic casing because of the mental abuse they've suffered at the hands of the Yellow Rabbit. And not only them, but his own daughter as well. The film may not be that scary, but there are horrific aspects to it. And those horrific elements are what happens to the children that were kidnapped and then killed. I mean, that is bad enough. But then to know they're kept in the animatronics, forever trapped at Freddy's, and are continually targeted by the Yellow Rabbit. It's horrifying. Oh, and I absolutely loved that they had Matthew Lillard do the signature Stu knife wipe. That I loved. Five Nights is currently out in cinemas, but it is also being released for streaming on Peacock on Friday the 27th of October, which, if all goes to plan, should be when this episode comes out, or maybe I'll release it on the Thursday. Either way, you are able to check it out on streaming if you can't get to the cinema. Well, that is going to be it for my review of Five Nights at Freddy's. I know it's a bit shorter than my usual reviews, but hopefully you guys still enjoyed it. If you did, then I'd love it if you could give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're not new here, then you may have also noticed that my intro was missing from this episode, but after looking at my analytics, I'm just trying something a little different for a couple of episodes to see if it makes a difference to my views. I'm just not sure if the intro actually works for you guys or not. Also, look, I got a brand new backlight and hands-free. I just got so tired of holding the mic and it had affected my audio in the last video, so I finally replaced my mic stand, and while I was editing the last video, I didn't like how it looked without my backlight. It just didn't feel right. So I invested in a new one and I feel so much more like me now. It is pink this time, which isn't really me, but kind of love it. It works for me. I mean, red and blue are my channel colours, so the pink works with the blue backlight, I think. Let me know what you think. This is also a different release day for me, but I wanted to get the review out before it hit streaming, and hey, lucky you! You get 2 episodes this week. You will also be getting 2 episodes next week, as I'm dropping my Saw ranking next week. I've actually just filmed that one, hence the t-shirt, but that will be released on... Well, I was going to release it on the 31st of October as a little Halloween treat, but I might actually release it the day before then because you guys might be busy on Halloween. Either way, Saw ranking will either be the 30th or the 31st, and there will be a usual Sunday release after that. So it might be a good idea to make sure you have the notification bell turned on so you don't miss anything extra that I drop on the channel, as I really want to try and get more content out for you guys. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.